So again, we talked earlier. You're living or originally from Wales, but also part Gibraltarian as well. I think you might be the first person I've ever actually spoken to from Gibraltar, which is amazing. But I would love to hear about your life growing up and how you kind of were introduced to music and who some of your influences might have been early on.
My earliest influences, I'd say, are like any other child, like parents, grandparents, and your school friends, and the groups that you go to school and join in with. Um, my grandfather is like this old ex-miner from the Welsh Valleys, and he sings in like an 80 strong male voice choir. So
Wow.
it's like spectacular to go and see their concerts. So I kind of was already brought up in a very musical family anyway. My mother's a cellist, even though she's a head teacher now, but she did do performing arts. And my dad's actually like a painter and an artist. So already I was kind of destined to do something artistic. But I think musically growing up, the people that I were sort of loved listening to were Santana, lots of percussion because I'm a drummer.
Yep.
So like I just absolutely loved um anything rhythmic or like in your face with like three drum kits.
Right.
So
Right.
Santana was a huge influence. And then also your classic Fleetwood Mac, Sting, and then later on when I started going, oh, I can listen to the stuff that I like to listen to on my own now. That was when Florence and the Machine, Pink, kind of Adele, all of the kind of really strong, independent female big vocals started kind of, I started listening to them and going, oh my gosh, I want to do that.
I love that, man.
So
Part
yeah.
part of the cool thing about being able to interview folks like you is just unpacking how they came to be who they came to be, and it's such a cool process. Just because I listen to your music and then hear your answer to that, and I'm like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Or like I hear that little
Yeah.
tidbit, now that makes sense. Like your mom being a cellist, like
Yeah.
I can see that. I see that now. Like it makes perfect sense to me. So when did you know that music and theater were passions that were meant to be kind of important staples in your life and end up being your career, really?
I just kind of realized that every single day I was listening to music, or I had to. Like I could, if I didn't listen to music one day, I would be like sad.
It's that addiction,
It's
right?
quite, it's yeah,
Yeah.
literally. I'm like discovering new artists. When my friends started like getting into bands, I used to go and like hang around in the lunch break and the kind of school breaks and be like, oh, I want to do that. And then I started having lessons and stuff on the drum kit, and that really, really ignited a kind of strong desire to kind of make it a professional thing that I I say earn money from. Tried to earn money from. um, yeah, I've just always really loved music and acting as well. That was I loved doing the school concerts, and musical theatre really quickly became a massive influence to me. I think in um, some of my tracks that I've released now as a solo artist, um, I think you can kind of tell that I'm theatrical in some sense. I think I did an interview once with a guy, and he was like, what would you call your genre?" And I was in between releasing like um a ballad, and then I did like a pop song right next, and I was like, "Oh, I'm not really fitting into one thing at the moment, so I'm just going to call it theatrical pop because it's just really theatrical that my songs take you on a bit of a journey." So yeah.
You know, it's funny. It's funny you say that because as somebody, as a listener, I'm not a musician at all. Never written a dang thing in my life. But as a listener and a huge fan of music, maybe I'm just missing it, but I don't see that. Like I feel like there's a separation between your theatrical side, your acting side, your musical side, and then listening to your pop. Yeah, the subject matter is there, and there's a lot of importance in your messaging in the songs. But I don't see that background unless you tell me about it, and I definitely want to ask you
Ah,
about that in a little while because I think that's an interesting dynamic. We've had musical artists on on my show before, and I always it's just a cool process. And trying to separate between that and another genre is really difficult because you can pick up
Yeah.
bad habits from being in a musical and being in that life that don't work in a commercial way, if you know what I mean. So
It's true. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's
yeah.
so true.
So I want
Yeah.
to talk to you about that because I find that very interesting about your style as a
Mhm.
solo artist now. But I'd love to hear what the music scene is like in Wales, where you came up in. Is there a lot of genre diversity there that you grew up into locally?
Yeah, it's I'd say there's quite a heavy kind of indie pop and rock scene here. I think a lot of the local music scene, especially in the valleys where I am, which is probably about half an hour north of Cardiff,
Okay.
the capital of Wales. There's a lot of kind of pubs and clubs that are championing young bands and indie artists. There's also a massive singer-songwriter scene, so they love the kind of folky sound. Actually, one of my friends, Sean Russell Jones, his name is, he's an exceptional guitarist and musician and writer, and now he acts as well. Um, he is actually in a new band called the Taff Rapids, which are a bluegrass band, and they've
Wow.
been back and forth to America. Yeah, and I'm pretty sure the lead singer, I say lead singer, one of the singers in the band is from California. Not California. He's actually Canadian, I think. But there's a Canadian, a Scotsman, Sean is the Welsh guy, and they've all come together. And this is kind of like Celtic mismatch of like they calling it bluegrass, which is quite fun. But bluegrass spelt BLWS, like the Welsh.
Nice.
So yeah, that's really cool. So there's quite I'd say in band scene, and then definitely kind of indie singer songwriter vibes. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. I love that. I need to go there then because that's what I really dig.
Yes.
I really love the toned down acoustic. Man, there's just so much vulnerability in that kind of music, isn't there? Man, I
Yeah.
feel like the word feel is so important within music, and the more you produce something, I feel like the more feel is eroded away from what's meant to be. And the singer songwriter
Hmm.
vibe really captures feel, and I feel like that's the way it used to be, right? And now today, there's just so much oversaturation of music that like you lose that feel sometimes. Um, Now,
Yeah.
you've had a long history, though, of different bands, different styles, different, just all kinds of stuff. I imagine that's because of your influences, your granddad, your mom, all of that stuff. Can you tell us a bit about your journey through time in music and going from folk and pop and rock and musicals and all of that stuff?
Yeah, definitely. So obviously I started off in school in choirs, and then I started drumming. So that meant that I was able to join the orchestra. It's orchestra, as I like to call it. And that was when I started to learn about timpani drums and kind of big, like orchestrational Pirates of the Caribbean music and like, all of that classical stuff. And that was around about the same time I started drum lessons and also started a samba band. And then I got so good on the drums that sometimes my teacher would let me take the samba band. The samba band led me on to folk group where I sat on like the flamenco box, the cajon. It's used, it's kind of like a drummer's best friend for not bothering to take a drum kit to a gig.
Yep.
Um, so I started playing the cajon, and then I was like, well, maybe I can sing and play the cajon. So I started doing that, and that led me on to a performing arts um, B Tech, we call it over here, kind of like an A level equivalent, doing performing arts, so dance, singing, musical theatre. When I was there, I met a guy called Christian Punter, and Michael actually, and because there was three of us to begin with, and we developed a band called Only the Rain, and it ended up just being me and Christian continuing that, and that was when I really, really had my kind of folk awakening, if you like. And I was listening to like, oh my gosh, so many like Fleetwood Foxes, like proper indie folk groups, and I loved it, and it's where I learned to sing on the cajon, but in harmony with Christian, and really understand. we've got different accents. I'm very Welsh,
Mhm.
he's English. So it was trying to tone into each other in that way. And I learned a lot from that whilst being in choir still. So that was really important to me. And I wanted to be an opera singer.